Chapter 18, 5 Years in the Desert, October 25th and 26th, 2002. The 25th was a hot wash day. Hot wash is when you try to take everything that's hot in your memory and wash it out clean onto reports. Slats knew our nighttime activities were hectic. We insisted we reset our memory banks to 0 before going out for more. The patch was buzzing with activity. Cricket and Buddha worked on our bikes. Our tech guy did routine maintenance on our temperamental recording devices. Other guys processed mugshots and rap sheets and added surveillance photos to the suspect matrix. Timmy and I typed reports and went over op plans with Slats. Slats had some good news. He'd been able to secure JJ for a couple nights. She hadn't been approved for action, but Slats said he was getting closer to a green light. I said great. The overall mood at Black Biscuit headquarters was euphoric. Our plan was working well. This was the first time in the case when we started to overachieve as a unit. My confidence was rising, and since I was one of the case's chief barometers, the whole team's confidence rose too. I called Gwen after completing reports. She didn't want to hear from me. Dale was having a high time in the beginning of the school year. Some problems with math that I didn't take the time to understand. Jack was doing fine, but he was still a kid who wanted his old man more than he got him. Gwen was pissed because she was tired of playing mom and dad. She was stressed. I tried to explain to her that I was too. I told her a little bit about what I was doing. She knew I was trying to get in on the Angels, but she thought all I did was party all the time, hang out with loose women, ride a bike, and have fun. That pissed me off, and the conversation ended quickly. She said she needed some time to herself. I said that I did too, that it wasn't like my life was all roses. Gwen couldn't hear that. She was holding our family together with dedication and spit, and I was being ungrateful. We didn't quite hang up on each other, but we didn't quite say goodbye either. I didn't speak to the kids. After that, Timmy, Slats, Cricket, and I discussed Rudy. At one point during the festivities of the 24th, Bad Bob had asked me if I'd heard from Rudy. I'd done what every undercover operator should endeavor to do whenever possible. I told him the truth, that I hadn't heard from Rudy and that it was worrying me. I told Bob he'd gotten his nose deep in the bag and had gone off the map. Bad Bob asked me if he was cooking, and I said I didn't know, but if I'd had to guess, I'd say yes. Bob's concerns were mixed. There were security issues, but he was also being opportunistic. Bad Bob was always looking for a tweet. Regardless, he acted concerned about Rudy. He asked if I was using, and I said no way. By that time, Bad Bob had seen a set of tattoos emblazoned across my pecs. GDJ on the right and DOA on the left. He knew that GDJ He knew that GDJ stood for goddamn junkie. Actually, it stood for Gwen, Dale, and Jack. And that DOA stood for what DOA always stands for. In my case, it commemorated the fact that Brent Provisgard had essentially rendered me DOA back when I was shot as a rookie agent. It's located over the exact spot that his bullet exited my chest. I told Bad Bob, however, that DOA referred to the time when I'd overdosed and nearly killed myself. I said these tattoos were constant reminders to stay clean. No one doubted my story 1 inch, including Bad Bob. But we were talking about Rudy. Bad Bob laid it out simple. You gotta bring Rudy back in. We decided to take Bad Bob's advice literally. Party night. Serious Hells Angels heaven. The local cops secured the street. It was a comical scene. On one side of the barricade were marked units with twirling cherry lights and uniforms posing tensely. The cops were outnumbered on the other side of the barricade by relaxed Hells Angels, prospects, and hangarounds. The guys lounged in folding chairs and drank beer, leaned on their bikes, and sat on the curb. It was, for the Angels' point of view, a perfect example of their existence beyond the system, a picture of their out-of-bounds status. The cops were there to protect the outside world from the Hells Angels, but they were also there to protect the Angels from the outside world. In a sense, the cops were working for the Angels that night. I arrived 45 minutes after Pops, Timmy, and Timmy's female partner, a prospect I'd never met at the police barricade at the end of the block. The cops looked at me sideways. I nodded to them, openly mocking them. They were used to it. They'd been getting that all night. I showed the prospect my invite and he let me in. I was stamped in at the clubhouse gate. It was a bona fide convention. Bikes constantly hummed, music constantly pounded. You could have resurrected a herd of cows with the leather in evidence, or created the world's largest pair of jeans with all the denim. Every shape, color, and length of beard was present, from ZZ Top to the Flavor Saver. The pungent smell of marijuana hung over the whole place, as if smoke rose from the storm drains on the street and the vents in the house, as if every step taken was on an inch of thick carpet of perfumed buds. Women laughed, men scowled. Men laughed, women scowled. Beer was the water of life, whiskey man's surest elixir. A circus tent their neighbor had allowed them to place in his backyard underscored the party's surrealism. Smitty was near the entry gate when I walked in. He gave me a big hug. I congratulated him and the Angels and said it looked like everything was going well. He pulled me aside. "Berg, gotta tell you something I just found out. One of my contacts in the Bullhead Police told me that they're looking into you guys up there. They want to know what you're up to bad. They've assigned a gang task force to you. They're handing out flyers with your picture on it and everything. So, be careful, alright?" I gripped his arm. It was the first I'd heard of this, and I was sincerely grateful. I'd have Sean Wood from the Arizona Department of Public Safety check on it the next day. I stayed with the Bullhead gang for a few minutes, then excused myself to find my crew. Timmy and Pops were hanging out with the Red Devil named James. Timmy told me later that they'd been discussing large quantity marijuana buys, gun deals, and moving stolen cars. James had given Timmy his cell number and told him to call him the following week. Timmy said he most definitely would. James wandered off, and we solos were alone for a few minutes. We stood by the bar in the common area of the clubhouse. A topless stripper in gold bikini bottoms and another stripper in a tight, torn t-shirt with the Screaming Eagle on it giggled at the far end. Ghost, who'd broken his leg when he went OTB over the bars in a traffic accident, talked to these women along with Rock'em and Sock'em. We were approached by Dennis, Dolly, and another couple in their early 50s. Dennis introed them as JoJo and Tracy Valenti. The guy was a monster, weighed in around 300 pounds, his bald head smaller than his neck, which was smaller than his upper arm. He had a donut-sized death head tattooed on his right ear. His flared-out, bushy beard was as big as his face. His cheeks were clean-shaven. He sweated and breathed like a fat man. He was past his prime, but it was obvious that back in the day, he was a flat-out wrecking ball. JoJo was the Tucson vice president, one of the guys with Doug Dam and Fang. He was on crutches. One of his legs was in a cast, the other was a prosthetic. The story of his remaining leg had recently become infamous. JoJo had broken his ankle in a motorcycle accident and gashed it pretty badly. They stitched him up, put him in a cast, gave him crutches, and told him to keep off the leg. He didn't listen. Considering he was diabetic, he really should have. He took bad care of the cast, let it get wet in the rain and in the shower, walked on it, rolled, everything. Everyone noticed that JoJo had been smelling bad lately, but no one talked about why. He was a fat guy. Fat guys don't always smell like roses. JoJo complained of pain and severe itching. One day as he sat on the toilet, blood started to ooze from the cast around his foot. His toes were as black as the leather of his cut. Tracy took him to the hospital. As they cracked the cast open, a swarm of young black flies buzzed out. The gash was full of maggots. The doctors cleaned him out, gave him a new cast, and told him to take better care of it. He said he would. We moved on and met more angels. One was Dwayne Crow Williams, a Mesa member who was old and senile and mumbled everything he said. He was always armed, even though he barely seemed to register what went on around him. His wife led him around the party by the arm and propped him up on bar stools and fetched him drink after drink. She was more of a chaperone than a spouse. From the first time I met Crow, he called me Pruno. I insisted I was Bird, but he said that was bullshit. I was Pruno. He said that I was Pruno because I made the best jailhouse wine he'd ever tasted. Months after the anniversary party, I bought a Taurus pistol from Crow. Before he handed me the piece, he pointed out blood splatter on the muzzle. In a burst of clarity, he told me he tried to scrub it off but could never get it all the way clean. I told him it didn't matter, it was a gun, right? He smiled and told me he liked it. Gave me a little necklace with a dagger pendant. I asked him what it was for. He said, "Because you're the real deal, Pruno." I told him from the 1,000th time that my name was Bird. He shrugged and said, "Well, keep it anyway." Months after that, as the case was coming to an end, Crow would be the last Hells Angel we'd have contact with. We met Daniel Hoover Saber, the president of Cave Creek. He told us to come visit him at his place, the RBC Tavern. We said we'd drop by for sure. We met Robert Mack McKay. He was the Tucson member with the non-association clause in his probation, a probation he'd received for beating down the ex-president of the Tucson charter. He wore a phony long gray beard and a brown wig, 2 tones of hair that belonged on separate heads so the cops wouldn't mess with him. His real beard bled out from beneath the fake, and as the night went on and the beard kept flowing, he looked more and more ridiculous. I wasn't sure why he wore the disguise inside the clubhouse. Since there was no one there, he had to fool. Like everyone else, Max said he'd heard good things about us solos. I was typically gracious and humble. He seemed to be a nice guy and was, as I'd find out, a damn good tattoo artist. It was a whirlwind. At one point, Pop stepped away to get some beer. As he crossed the room, an older angel, tan, trim, wearing eyeglasses, stepped into his path and grabbed his arm. I immediately recognized him as Ralph Sonny Barger. This was the first time I laid eyes on the man. He was around 65, but looked to have had the health of a vibrant man in his 50s. A remarkable achievement considering the paces he put his body through over the decades. He had close-cropped white hair, was clean-shaven, and looked more like a Marine drill sergeant than a lifelong outlaw. He moved with all the confidence and sureness of a sultan in his harem. For those who don't know, this was the man, the legend, really, who molded the Hells Angels into what they are. It's not a stretch to say that Sonny Barger is a visionary who essentially created the image of the outlaw biker as we know it. He had help, to be sure, and the names of his cohorts dating back to the late 50s through the present are legendary in the biker world. Johnny Angel, Terry the Tramp, Magoo, Junkie George, Moldy Marvin, Cisco, Valderrama. Together with a host of others, these men created the image, the leather, the hair, the grime, the hardness, the silence, the impenetrability, the bikes, everything that constitutes an outlaw biker, especially the bikes. Without the Hells Angels, we wouldn't have floor model Harleys that look like stripped down screen machines, no ape hangers, no flared fenders, no bitch bars, no spool wheels, no front end extenders. There'd be less chrome, less creative paint jobs, less style. The HA were obsessed with going fast, and without this obsession, bikes would be slower. They were relentless in stripping their bikes of all but the barest essentials. The formula was simple: less weight plus bigger engines equaled more speed. Every pound they shed gained them 2 more miles per hour. Thus, choppers chopped down motorcycles. What they did was mimicked by everyone who wanted to be a Hells Angels but couldn't be. Their influence is seen today in bikes designed by Jesse James of West Coast Choppers and the Totals of Orange County Choppers. Bikes aside, a world without Sonny Barger would look pretty much the same, but the world of the outlaw biker, if it even existed, would look a lot different. He is the iconic outlaw biker, and all members of every club look up to him as the godfather of their culture. He saw that the Angels could go international, that though American in origin, they needn't be limited to American borders. As I've said before, I believe that the Hells Angels, and to a lesser extent, all American-style biker gangs, are this country's only organized crime export. This is the doing of Ralph Sonny Barger. He embodies everything about the Hells Angels, from their unwavering image right down to their contradictions. Those contradictions fascinate me. The Hells Angels are separate from society, but they're rooted in it. They're nonconformists, but they all look the same. They're a secret society, but also flamboyant exhibitionists. They flout the laws of the land, but they're governed by a strict code. Their name and their death head logo represent freedom, individualism, toughness, and lawlessness, but both name and logo are protected by legal trademarks. The way these contradictions manifest in the real world is what really pisses me off. These guys shouldn't be able to have it both ways. I mean, if you don't respect the law, then why use certain laws to protect yourself? Why conduct toy runs and other charity drives to bolster your public image if you don't care about what the public thinks? Which is it? Are you misunderstood by bike enthusiasts or violent hoodlums? When the Angels are at their criminal best, they embody everything an outlaw ought to. Fight first and ask questions later. Better yet, don't ask questions. Take what you want. Turf, pussy, beer, bikes, drugs. Be violent and don't apologize. I never apologized for being an undercover cop, even when it put me in life-threatening or ethically compromising positions. I never apologized for arresting people who deserved it, whether I liked them or not. I never apologized for being on the other side of the Hells Angels coin. Like me, most of these guys had a chip on their shoulder, but unlike me, they all thought that society unjustly discriminated against them. Like me, they had no interest in a regular job or lifestyle. Maybe I cherished my family and friends more than they did, but didn't they cherish their brothers and their club in the same way? They knew they were outcasts, so why not be outcasts altogether? Maybe the essence of their alienation was a question of nature versus nature. Maybe, just maybe, they did get a raw deal. Did the Hells Angels shun the world, or did the world shun them? These armchair reflections never crossed my mind during the investigation. All I thought as I watched Sonny approach Pops was, wow, there's the chief. The fucking chief is here with us. I told myself I wouldn't be impressed by his presence, but I was wrong. I was starstruck. Pops was too. All of Sonny's movements and gestures were charming. I couldn't hear him, but I could tell by the way Pops turned his ear to him that Sonny's tracheostomy hole made no difference. There was nothing funny about Sonny's cancer kazoo. In fact, it made him more formidable. They'd carved his throat out 30 years back, and the guy hadn't missed a beat. Sonny was the king of outcasts, and he knew it. We all did. Sonny checked out Pops' solo cut and gave him a hearty hug, and they parted. Pops told me later that Sonny had said, "Thanks for coming out. Thanks for showing respect. You should come visit us at Cave Creek. We have a charter up there too." The Solo Angels Nomads had the blessing of the Godfather, and it felt good. We hung out. Bad Bob looked more like Barry Gibb than ever. His hair was immobile, perfectly frozen in place with a net of hairspray. Doug Dam wanted to know if I wanted any of those things, referring to more guns. I winked and told him we'd talk later. I hung out in the front yard and watched the members-only door swing wide open. Inside, on a low table, I saw a rock of crystal the size of a baseball. Next to it was a mound of ground meth several inches high. Members came and went. Their women came and went. Women, exempt from ever being members, were allowed to enter the front house with permission from a pack. All leaned over the table to snort. All came up zooming. At some point during the evening, I remembered that I brought a donation. I found Bad Bob and handed it to him. He peeked inside at 5 crispy $100 bills and removed a Solo Angels business card. We'd had 1,000 printed, black and orange, FSSF. On the back, I'd written, "Love and respects, Solos." He put it in his vest. We shook hands and ended up hugging. Everyone was happy. They were happy because they'd made it 5 years in the desert. We were happy because we thought they'd never make it to 10. Success and smoke and that dank smell of beer infused everything. The haze never lifted. The party wasn't going to end. I have no idea when we left.